Have you ever had feelings for someone you weren't supposed to? A coworker, a sibling's partner, a teacher? My twin sister's husband. I know how that sounds. Her name is Ray. Mine is Dana. We're identical, or we were supposed to be, except she got the confidence gene and I got the one that makes you apologize to furniture when you bump into it. Growing up, people couldn't tell us apart until we opened our mouths. She talked first. She talked louder. She talked over me at Thanksgiving so many times that by the time I was 20, I'd basically stopped finishing sentences out loud. I just finished them in my head and let her have the room. She met Caleb in grad school. I met him 3 months later at a barbecue where Ray was already 20 minutes late because she's always 20 minutes late, and he was standing by the cooler trying to figure out how the bottle opener worked. And I showed him, and he said, "Thanks, Ray." And I said, "I'm actually Dana." And he looked so embarrassed, genuinely embarrassed, not the fake kind, that he apologized like 4 separate times over the course of the night. Nobody had ever cared that much about getting it wrong before. People mixed us up constantly and mostly just shrugged. I told myself that was it. A funny story, nothing. They got married 2 years later. I was a bridesmaid, obviously matching dress, matching shoes, stood 2 feet away while my sister married a man I had already, quietly, without telling one single soul, started building a whole private life around in my head. Not a fantasy life. Nothing dramatic. Just noticing things. He remembers everyone's coffee order. He calls his mom every Sunday at exactly 6. He laughs at his own jokes a half second before anyone else does. Like he can't help it. Like the joke got him too. I did not want to feel this way. I spent actual years trying to talk myself out of it. I dated other people. I dated Marcus for 14 months, specifically because he was nothing like Caleb. Loud where Caleb was quiet, aggressive where Caleb was gentle, and I thought if I just picked someone different enough, it would drown the other thing out. It didn't drown anything out. It just made me lonelier in a relationship than I'd ever been outside of one, because I kept comparing the quiet at the dinner table to a quiet that didn't even belong to me. I even tried therapy for it, sort of sideways, never saying the actual thing out loud. I'd sit in my therapist's office and talk about attachment patterns and unavailable men, and she'd nod and take notes, and I'd drive home knowing I hadn't told her the real thing, the thing underneath all the other things, because saying it to a stranger felt like it would make it real in a way that just carrying it silently didn't. I told myself that was smart. Looking back, I think it was just cowardice with a nicer name. There was a period, maybe 8 months in the middle of all this, where I genuinely thought I'd beaten it. Marcus and I had just moved in together. I stopped going to family dinners as much, told everyone I was busy with work, which was half true. I remember feeling almost proud of myself, like I'd quietly solved a problem nobody else even knew existed. Then Ray posted a video from a weekend trip, just Caleb laughing at something off camera, maybe 3 seconds long, and I watched it 11 times in a row sitting on my bathroom floor with the door locked while Marcus watched TV in the next room. And that was the night I knew I hadn't solved anything. I'd just gotten better at holding my breath. Family stuff meant I was around Caleb constantly. That's the thing nobody tells you about falling for your sibling's spouse. There's no clean way to just remove yourself. Christmas, birthdays, the group chat, the Sunday dinners my mom insisted on even after all of us had jobs and lives that made Sunday dinners genuinely inconvenient. I sat across from him at that table probably 200 times over 4 years. I know that because I counted once in a low moment, doing math on my phone in a parking lot like it would tell me something useful. Here's where it gets complicated in a way that isn't just about me being sad and pining, because honestly that part alone I could have carried forever, quietly, and taken it to my grave. What made it complicated was that Ray and Caleb's marriage was not good. I want to say that carefully because I'm not trying to build a case for myself, but it's true. She worked late constantly, and when she was home she was on her phone, and when he tried to talk to her about it, she'd say something like, "We're not all lucky enough to have a job we can leave at 5, which was a dig at him for being a high school teacher, and he'd just go quiet and start doing dishes that didn't need doing. I watched this happen at family dinners. I watched him shrink a little more every year, and some sick small part of me thought, I would never make you feel like that. I never said it, but I thought it more times than I'm proud of. The night everything actually happened was nothing special, which somehow makes it worse to tell. No wine, no big confession scene, no rain. It was a Tuesday. My mom's dishwasher had died, and Caleb, being Caleb, said he'd come fix it because that's the kind of thing he does. And Ray had a work trip, and my mom was at her book club, and somehow it ended up being just me and him in my mom's kitchen at 8 p.m. with him on his knees pulling hoses out from under the sink, and me handing him tools I mostly didn't know the names of. We were laughing about something dumb. I genuinely don't remember what. And he sat back on his heels and looked up at me and said, "You know, you're the only person in this family who's ever actually funny. Everyone else just repeats things they saw online." And I said something back, some joke to deflect it, and he said, "No, I'm serious." And there was this pause. Not a long dramatic one, maybe 2 seconds. But I felt it land somewhere in my chest like a stone dropped in water. And I think he felt it too, because his face changed, just slightly, like he'd hurt himself. Neither of us said anything else about it. He finished the dishwasher. I made him a coffee he didn't drink because it went cold on the counter while he worked. He asked if I wanted to test the cycle with him, which is such a stupid, small, nothing thing to remember in detail. But I remember exactly how it felt standing next to him in the dark kitchen listening to a dishwasher hum like it was the most important sound I'd ever heard. He left around 9:30. I sat at my mom's kitchen table for another 20 minutes by myself before I trusted myself to drive. And when I got home, I didn't tell Marcus anything happened because nothing had, technically, and also because I didn't trust my own voice not to give something away. For 2 months after that, I told myself it was nothing. A weird moment, a fluke of tiredness and bad timing in a marriage that was clearly struggling anyway. Then Ray showed up at my apartment on a Thursday night, no warning, mascara already ruined, and told me she wanted a divorce. And she needed to stay with me for a few days while she figured out logistics because she couldn't stand to look at him right now. I want to tell you, I felt relief. I did not. I felt sick. Actual physical nausea, because some ugly, hopeful part of my brain that I hated immediately started doing math about what this meant, while another part of me was holding my sister while she cried into my shoulder about a man I had spent 4 years quietly loving. Both of those things were happening in my body at the exact same time, and I didn't know what to do with either of them. She stayed with me for 11 days. 11 days of her venting about him at my kitchen table. Some of it fair, a lot of it not, and me nodding along while feeling like the worst person alive, because every time she said something critical about him, some small traitor part of me was cataloging it, filing it away, thinking that's not who he is with me. Not that anything had happened with me. Nothing had, but I was already keeping score in a game only I knew we were playing. Marcus and I broke up during those 11 days, which I know sounds like a small detail buried in a much bigger story, but it wasn't small to me. He said I'd been somewhere else for months, that he could feel it even when he couldn't name it, and he was right, and I didn't even fight him on it. I just packed his stuff into a box while my twin sister slept in my guest room crying about a marriage I had spent 4 years secretly wishing I could have instead of her. I remember standing in my kitchen after he left, looking at the space where his coffee mug used to sit, thinking I have officially ruined my own life for a man who has no idea I exist that way, and laughing, actually laughing, at how pathetic that felt. Alone, at 11 at night, with my sister crying 2 rooms away. I made her tea most of those nights. I sat with her on the couch while she scrolled through old photos of their wedding, asking out loud what she did wrong, and every single time I had to physically stop myself from saying you didn't do anything wrong. He's a good man because saying it with that much conviction would have told her everything. So instead I said generic things like relationships are complicated, marriage takes work from both people, the kind of sentences that mean nothing and cost nothing and let you keep your secrets intact. On day 9, she told me the real reason for the divorce, and it wasn't him at all. She'd been seeing someone from her office for months. She said it so casually, like she was telling me about a work trip, and something in me just went cold and quiet. All that anger she'd been performing about Caleb not appreciating her, not trying hard enough, being boring, being distant. It had been cover the whole time. He hadn't failed the marriage. She'd already left it, months before she said the word divorce out loud. She just hadn't told anyone, including him. I didn't yell at her. I wanted to. What came out instead was very calm and very cold. I asked her if Caleb knew, and she said not yet. And I asked why she'd let him think it was his fault for 2 months. And she got defensive and said I didn't ask you to take his side. And I said I'm not taking anyone's side, I'm asking a simple question. And she left the next morning and stayed at a hotel instead. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my phone in my hand at 2 in the morning with Caleb's contact open, thumb hovering over the call button, telling myself I was doing it for him, that he deserved the truth, when really I think some ugly corner of my heart just wanted an excuse to hear his voice at 2 a.m. and call it justice. I didn't send it. I put the phone face down on the mattress and made myself lie there in the dark until it got light outside. And that's probably the closest I've ever come to feeling like a genuinely bad person. Not for loving him, but for how badly I wanted to be the one to hand him that particular kind of pain, dressed up as honesty. Caleb found out about her affair 3 weeks later. Not from her, from a mutual friend who assumed he already knew. He called me because he didn't know who else to call. Everyone else in the family was, understandably, orbiting Ray, comforting her through her divorce, not realizing she was the one who'd broken it. I was the only person who'd known the whole truth for weeks and said nothing. And when he found out that I'd known, there was a night, one specific night, where I thought he'd never speak to me again. And honestly, some part of me thought I deserved that. That night he showed up at my apartment without calling first, which he'd never done, not once in 4 years. He stood in my doorway and asked very quietly, how long? And I said 3 weeks. And he just nodded, like he was doing math in his head that came out to a worse number than he expected. He didn't yell either. Everyone in this story kept not yelling, which I've thought about a lot since. How the biggest betrayals in my family happened almost silently. Like we'd all agreed volume wasn't allowed even when it would have been justified. He asked if that was the only thing I'd kept from him, and I felt my whole chest go tight because I knew what he was really asking. And I said, I don't know what you mean. And he looked at me for a long time and said, okay, and left. I didn't hear from him for 19 days after that. I counted those too. I told him the truth, all of it, that I'd known about the affair and hadn't told him because it wasn't mine to tell, and I was terrified of what it would mean if I did, given everything else I'd been carrying about him for years. I said it out loud for the first time in my life, standing in his kitchen, the same kitchen where none of this had technically started, but where I think it had always been quietly living. I told him I was sorry, that I never wanted this, that I'd tried for years to want anyone else and I couldn't, and that he should probably ask me to leave and never come back and I would understand completely. He didn't say anything for what felt like an entire minute, then he said something I didn't expect at all. He said he'd known since Thanksgiving 3 years ago, the year I dropped a serving spoon, the second he touched my hand reaching for the same dish, and neither of us said anything about it. But he said he'd caught himself thinking about that moment more times than a married man should admit to thinking about anything. He said he'd never never acted on it, not once, not even close. Because Ray was his wife and I was her sister, and some things you just don't do no matter what you feel. And he'd spent 3 years being quietly, privately ashamed of a feeling he never gave a single inch of room to. I don't have a clean ending for you. We didn't fall into each other's arms that night. He asked me to leave, actually, not out of anger. He was very clear about that. But because he said if we stood in that kitchen much longer saying true things out loud, he didn't trust either of us to make good decisions while the divorce papers weren't even signed yet. And I think that was the most respectful thing anyone's ever said to me. I cried the whole drive home. Not sad crying exactly. More like something in my chest had been clenched for 4 straight years and had finally, suddenly, let go, and my body didn't quite know what to do with the space that left behind. I called in sick to work the next day, which I never do, and spent the whole morning sitting on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, in the exact spot Marcus's coffee mug used to sit, thinking about how strange it is that the thing you've buried the longest doesn't feel like relief when it finally surfaces. It just feels like grief for all the years you spent burying it. My mom found out about everything eventually. Of course she did. Nothing stays quiet in my family for long. She didn't say much, which surprised me. She just looked at me across her kitchen table, the same table where the dishwasher story started, and said I always wondered why you got so quiet around him. And I thought I'd hidden it perfectly for 4 years. And it turns out my own mother had known before I'd said a single word. It's been 8 months. The divorce finalized in March. Ray and I don't really talk. Not out of some dramatic falling out, just a slow drift that started the day she found out I'd known and never said anything. And I don't think either of us knows how to close that gap yet, or if we want to. We still show up to the same family things because my mom refuses to let anyone skip Sunday dinner. And we sit at opposite ends of the table being polite in a way that feels worse than fighting would. Last month she asked me out of nowhere over dessert if I was in love with him, and I said, "What makes you ask that?" And she just looked at me and said, "I'm not stupid, Dana. I was just too busy to notice." And then she asked my mom to pass the salt like nothing had happened. And nobody at that table has mentioned it since. Caleb and I talk sometimes. Coffee, not dinner. Texts about nothing. The same way it always started. Him asking if I've tried some new show. Me sending him a bad joke he pretends not to laugh at. Sometimes we go weeks without talking at all. And I've stopped reading anything into the silence. Because I think we're both still figuring out what's allowed and what isn't. What's grief and what's guilt. And what's just two people who happen to fall for each other at the worst possible angle a family can produce. A few weeks ago, he texted me a photo of a dishwasher. Some new model he was looking at for his apartment. No caption, just the picture. And I sat there staring at it for a full minute before I typed back, "Does it come with a coffee that goes cold on the counter?" And he sent back 3 dots that appeared and disappeared 4 separate times before any words came through. And when they finally did, all he wrote was, "Some things are worth the wait." I think neither of us has said the word yet, whatever the word even is at this point. I don't know if we ever will. Some days I think we're just two people who got very good at waiting, and I don't know if either of us remembers how to stop, or if stopping is even something either of us deserves to ask for yet. But I keep his text thread open more than I probably should, and some nights that small, stupid amount of hope is the only thing that gets me through the guilt of how we got here at all.